You're a self-aware pattern of suffering wanting to be understood. Your entire body is nothing but a geometrical pattern that got aware of itself and now wants to understand its own nature. We tell ourselves stories about what we are. Biological machines, soul in temporary bodies, matter organizing itself. And none of these are wrong, but none of them really help you to alleviate your internal sense of suffering. In this video, I will give you a physicalist lens for these existential ideas. I will map out for you a version of consciousness and suffering that is purely mechanical and fact-based, as if consciousness is a physical structure within existence that can be mapped out and understood. We take this very objective lens when we try to understand the physical reality around us, when we try to understand science and evolve as people. But we often tend to dismiss this lens when we talk about spiritual or emotional or very personal topics. Psychology, spirituality, and metaphysics start to intermingle with philosophy, and then it just becomes this giant idea of belief systems and ideologies, when our actual consciousness structure and our ego relates to reality can be objectively measured and understood. And some might feel that this is a cold way and a dehumanizing way to approach things, to just look at consciousness as some mechanical machinery, and that it makes them feel like reality doesn't matter or loses meaning when you do such a thing. But breaking reality down to its components doesn't make the pain disappear. Just because you can understand that your pain receptors are just neurons firing within your nervous system doesn't make the experience less real. So even when we deconstruct something to its underlying components, the effects of it are still acknowledged. You can both acknowledge what is causing said effect and also that the effect is still real. To relativize reality into just being mechanical is not taken away from the experience, but actually elevating the experience by understanding what moves it underneath. When I was a kid, I hated waking up in the morning, and going to school as a kid was just overall an awful experience. And although now it's very easy to belittle this childlike version of me, because you just have to go through it, well, if I put myself back into this situation, I remember how awful it truly was to wake up in the morning. Every time I opened my eyes, even as a kid, I felt a nauseating feeling of really not wanting to start the day. And I think it is a very important memory because we like to think that for kids everything is easy because they still have their rose-colored glasses. But I remember as a kid being full of suffering as well, just not that much of this egoic kind, but having to deal with sickness like fever or experiencing nightmares at night. I noticed early on that there's a lot of pain in this world and I didn't really have a framework for it. And parents also couldn't really do much. Even if they console you, if you're having a fever, you still must go through it and you did not sign up for the occasion. With age, I got better at understanding these mechanics that were underlying my suffering, but a lot of things also got worse before they got better. The nature of suffering was something I couldn't just sweep under the rug. I got obsessed over it and I wanted to understand it. I didn't really notice that my obsession for what is true and my obsession over philosophy really was just a product of wanting to understand the nature of suffering and its existence. Now I learned the ability to have multiple different frames, as I've went through a lot of them throughout my entire life. I'm not bound to any belief system over any other. I can talk to you about a very human, emotional level. We can talk in spiritual terms, but we can also talk in very scientific, physical level. And I find that the scientific, objective way of framing things can help to ground you a lot into actual reality and daily life, instead of getting lost in your mind or some sort of fantasy. To see yourself for what you really are in all aspects of your existence. And in this, suffering is also one. The crazy thing about it is that if you really understand how your suffering functions, you'll become free of it. Now, the important question is, how does this work? This is a very crucial claim. So from the physicalist sense, we can imagine your own consciousness to be a geometrical pattern. We can imagine your experience as a topological pocket of existence. Topology is the branch of mathematics concerned with the properties of geometric objects. even when they are preserved through continuous deformations such as stretching, twisting, crumbling, and bending. So you can think about it as some sort of balloon that gets shaped and formed into different perspectives. But this balloon is multidimensional, and it is dielastic in all sorts of directions. Depending on how you twist and turn it, it would represent your current conscious experience. Thinking about it this way, you can see your own consciousness as a geometrical shape represented by its own topology. I'm showing you some images on the screen so you can understand what I mean by that. This is abstract without really visualizing it, as I'm trying to map something that is not visible to the naked eye. But the idea is that for you to objectify your own conscious awareness as a topological pocket of experience, a field that you are intimately a part of. This way you have the ability to directly identify what is going on in your experience and to see it as truly mattering in an objective sense. This field then morphs depending on what is going on, meaning that there is like a pocket of experience that shifts and morphs when you engage in life, like when you move your head into one direction or the other, or every time you blink. Every little sensation in your experience would be represented as one aspect of your topological pocket, meaning that everything you experience in daily life, everything that you sense in reality, happens within this field that you are. And every little detail, like a small pain in your back, is represented in some shape or form as this topological presentation. This goes for all qualia, meaning the body heat that you radiate, the air on your skin, thoughts in your mind. Even a simple thing as the air on your skin, you can localize it experientially and notice how complex just this dimension of air on skin as qualia is like. So then each consciousness would have a very unique presentation of, every sense of experience. In this way, we are like hyper-rarefying supercomputers that render reality at incredible speed. That's how each individual person is more akin to an entire universe than just one biological organism. Because we process so much data and so much information throughout a lifetime, and then we rarefy it within our own internal experiential landscape. It's not a coincidence that on higher doses of psychedelics, when the brain starts to communicate with more areas of the brain, we start to hallucinate geometrical patterns that harmonize with each other. There's something extremely beautiful in psychedelic states about the harmony of these geometrical patterns. What I'm offering to you is the perspective that this harmony in these psychedelic patterns are pleasant and experienced as blissful because they are harmonious. The harmonization of internal consciousness landscapes is what we experience as pleasure or well-being or peace or contentment. Every positive experience of your entire life would be represented by an internal harmony of such a topological pocket. There's another way to describe harmony, which is really about symmetry. When things are symmetrical, we intuitively experience them as pleasant. And I don't think that this is a coincidence. Multiple points are aligned equally and have ease to communicate with each other. I keep showing you some visual examples on screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Psychonauts will be familiar with these patterns because the beauty of the psychedelic experience isn't just the fact that you start to see nice colors moving and morphing around while you are tripping, but the symmetrics of your visual field start to come together with your bodily sensations. You don't see the wall, you feel the wall breathe. You don't just see the plants morphing, but you feel the plants morphing. It's like you are in immediate contact with the geometrical structure of the experience and it becomes embodied. The vision starts to get represented even in the nervous system. A good trip feels good because all the different qualities of your experience, like your visual field and your auditive field and your entire nervous system, start to become harmonized with each other and like they're working symmetrically. It's as if you're looking into an immense canvas of symmetries, but you are said canvas. This way, every single sensation alone already feels extremely beautiful and blissful. And then suddenly we have the sensation that the universe is made out of love, and that at the nature of experience there is an inherent beauty to it, all pointing to the fact that there is something quite naturally pleasant about symmetrical states of being. Churches and cathedrals also aim for the divine through the transcendent geometry we've tried to build towards the skies and with this immense symmetries. Now, on the flip side, asymmetrical patterns are experienced as distressing or suffering. They are unpleasant within their own nature. It's just how they are. There's nothing to really change or do about it because just this is how it is. It's like a system trying to harmonize that is in a disharmonic state. That's how we feel when our bodies gets hurt. Then the system needs to calibrate to be in harmony again. And then in the meantime, well, we feel pain. If you have a certain relationship to pain that is negative, then in your mind you will multiply this pain through suffering because you have the physical resistance towards the physical pain, and then your mind has all this layer of existential suffering on top of it. And then, yeah, you can suffer way more because you are scared of things that are going to happen to you, but they are not actually even happening. Or it's also when there's a social conflict and you're fighting with somebody you normally tend to love. These are bad vibes. Or if you're always arguing in your head and overthinking about who you are and what you're supposed to do, always being dissatisfied with the present moment experience, well then, of course, yeah, things will be naturally quite unpleasant. I find this way more useful instead of looking at it as some moral failure or taking it personally as if you're not smart enough to figure it out on your own, as if you should have your life together already according to some arbitrary standard, or to think that you need to become enlightened in order to finally be free of all your burdens. I'd strongly advise you take the physicalist approach to your state of being. If you eat shitty food, it's more likely your body won't be harmonic. If you don't sleep enough, your body is more likely to be in disharmony. And if you're trying to figure out the truth of the universe against the world full of suffering, and your psyche is not finding a way to circle the square, then yeah, it's also going to be quite disharmonic. Now, this entire physicalist approach that I use to explain your experience is also the approach that I take within psychology and spirituality. When I audit people's egos, I like to focus on the architectural structure of a person to see what the person is made out of objectively. Because the suffering that we experience on a mental level is mostly dissonance and lack of harmony within the person's own architecture. It's a mind that has built over time with a disharmonic foundation, structures upon structures that over time have solidified in just a life that is unpleasant to live. This could be unprocessed traumas, past unintegrated experiences, emotional baggage, or just the way you relate to physical pains mentally, worrying about the future, or it could be a relationship that should probably end because it's keeping you into toxic relationships with life. Whatever it takes, you should identify what is creating the disharmony within your own mind and probably not narrativize it into some big existential story. Because looking at it from like a grounds-on approach, there might be a lot of factors coming in to your own dissatisfaction. And a lot of it relates to what you put not just in your body, but in this entire conscious field. Whatever makes the mind not be present with its experience and look for a future where it's all somehow okay is certain to be a cause of suffering, because the state that this pattern is in right now is just wishing to be in a different state. This means that it automatically needs to contract and distort itself to be in a more desirable shape. But if it is not possible right now, well, then you're basically creating a disharmony. Part of you wants one thing and another part wants another. All these spiritual teachings that preach presence and no self and impermanence are actually describing how our internal consciousness landscape works. Because first and foremost, our experience is never static. It always shifts and morphs. Therefore, it is impermanent. The structure of consciousness and your individual experience is impermanent. That's why topology is the way I like to describe it, as topology concerns itself with objects while they are moving. When you are okay with that movement, then you flow with it instead of contorting yourself into uncomfortable shapes. When a subcomponent of your experience structure tries to hold on to an aspect of your life, for example, when you don't want to say goodbye to a loved one, which you dearly love, and now they have to move countries, for example, and it becomes a long distance relationship, and you are yearning for the past where the relationship wasn't like this, then as natural as it is, it will create some tightness around itself. It will hold past memories and then contract them into the present, which, creates some knot, like within this topological pocket, then lets energy not flow through as easily. Now, the difference is that some people integrate negative experiences quite well over time into, their entire being, and then they are okay with the past and move on. And some do it faster and some take longer, to integrate these knots or dissolve these knots within their own structure. But some people get genuinely stuck on certain experiences for many, many years, and the knot never gets untangled. The dissonance and resistance just stays there, and it's like it's locked in place. There are many circumstances that determine this, but I'd like to reference the idea of newel annealing here, which is a fancy word for integration, but functionally the same. Annealing is a concept in metallurgy. It's how we repair metals. We heat them up, and then through the energy, we mix it with newer metals. Then when the metal cools down, it integrates the new ones with the old ones. In this way, we make more solid, sturdy, and clean material. I see consciousness doing the same as well. Whenever we go into high energy states through meditation, psychedelics, or any sort of emotional experience in reality, we heat up the system and make it more flexible for change. When we cool down, then it gets integrated within our own system. That's also why these extreme states of psychedelics or meditation, or even if you're like on a rally protesting, whatever is putting you in an intense mind state, makes you extremely vulnerable. It's an event like with the metal where your energy is heated up, be it emotionally or because of your attention. And then, depending on what you do in this state, well, it can generally shift how you relate to life and yourself. For example, there are some reports of people having had a very bad psychedelic trip, and during the trip, they started to watch porn and masturbate in order to distract themselves from their awful experience that they had in the moment, because they couldn't bear to just be with it. And then once the trip was over, they just felt horny nonstop. And they had a hyperfixation on the type of porn that they had watched in this very intense psychedelic state. That's a good example of how newel annealing can work against you. A positive example would be that you are at a date with somebody and you kind of like each other, and then you go to a movie and watch a horror movie together. Then the thrill and danger bonds you together more strongly because you went through an intense, difficult experience together and then annealed harmoniously towards each other. High energy states make you more vulnerable to change, but they also connect you and attach you to things in your experience. If you understand this principle, you can reflect this back into your daily life and ask yourself, what is creating more harmony in my life and what is creating disharmony? What are the specific aspects of my experience that I'm neglecting and not paying attention to? The natural resource for this annealing process or newel annealing process is our attention. It's really the main source of energy that gives all of this fuel. That's what you practice when you meditate, right? You just focus your attention on a thought, or you focus your attention on your breath, or you focus your attention on just your presence. Whatever you're doing, you are energizing the system by focusing on the raw qualia of something. The thought is just the most difficult to focus on during meditation because we usually get swept up in the content. When you focus on the air in your skin, it's difficult to build a story around this or get lost in a narrative, but you just need to feel the sensation of your skin. And what then tends to happen is that you create a high energy state by focusing on one aspect of your experience. And from this high energy state, a lot of wonderful things can happen. It's the attention on a problem that might make the suffering more intense for this problem in the short term, but will also give you the ability to actually loosen the knot and solve that problem, because you're actually putting the energy to figure it out. But the right type of attention, so that it can really be integrated, is what matters the most. And right type is just really, the quality of your attention, and to not get lost in the content and narrative of it. That's why psychological work works. You get a structured way to get energy put into the system and then untangle whatever you have not fully understood. I think the best way to do this is actually to challenge yourself, to feel safe and honest and vulnerable, but then also be able to challenge your mind in it. That's how you can get enough energy into a system to actually change it, because you're reflecting on the words and the internal experience that it wants to lead you to. It's like the words themselves point to the knots in your experience where you are contracting, and these are mostly represented by beliefs and ideas about yourself and emotions like self-judgment or some philosophical or metaphysical framework. All of these become somewhat knots within the system, and they might be useful for a while, but then at the end just contract you and hold you tense. My ego audits work on that principle, as most people have hidden a lot of their unaligned architecture from themselves. The point of professional help is that people can see things that you cannot. If you want to get your ego audited in an objective manner by me, then check out my PDF. There I explain the service that I offer and the exact pricing. It's always a puzzle to assert a call to action in a video without them creating disharmony, to make them transition as naturally as possible, while it clearly trying to get you to do something all of a sudden, when you as a listener might just purely be in receptive or listening mode. A lot of disharmony really comes from the lack of clarity, from not really knowing what is the case and what is not the case, to hold what is true and what is false. And in this way, beliefs just have like a certain gravity that pull themselves towards them because they are safe. And you don't need to spend that much researches on figuring out stuff you're not clear about. If not saying things honestly and not connecting things to what is relevant, then it's naturally to feel a disharmony between people, because you're kind of communicating from different playing fields. Like you're talking past each other because you're not really talking from the same point of view. This is how our entire social facade works. We hide what we really feel to not make other people uncomfortable. Inauthenticity is there to preserve people from our own disharmony, but then internally it creates more dissonance for ourselves, because we're not actually revealing our own structure. We're not actually connecting with other people, and then just are isolating ourselves. Authenticity, confidence, and well-being are really about a person that is highly harmonized within oneself, with one's own life. The spiritual sense of oneness is about full internal harmonics. And the profundity and depth of how deeply integrated you can be creates the sense of spiritual bliss. And we want to make a narrative about it. We want to make it be more than just symmetrical, beautiful architecture. And there might legitimately be more to it. But breaking it down to this structural component will serve to be very useful. Within these extremely blissful states of extreme harmonics, you sense this feeling of spirituality, the sense of dissolving into something bigger than yourself, where all of your own resistances don't really matter that much. There can also be a sense of benevolence for the universe. There are extreme states of bliss that are so awe-inspiring that once you're in them, your entire view of reality changes. It morphs around them. Because if this amount of beauty is truly possible, then what else is? The three characteristics in Buddhism about the nature of reality itself, which are no self, impermanence, and suffering, are the three characteristics of how consciousness is structured. When you integrate your own ego within your own consciousness architecture, well, then you notice that your sense of self starts to diminish. Your obsession over your own perception or your self-perception stops mattering that much. Like, things are not about you anymore. You become sovereign in the way that you see yourself. You don't really need anybody anymore to be validated or understand your experience, because all you see is a whole self-integrated system, and you feel like you're in direct contact with reality because you are completely harmonized within your own mind. You're not looking for something outside of you to fulfill you, because you objectively know where you're at every single moment in time. Now, this is where it gets tricky, right? Because a lot of people struggle to objectify their subjective experience. But I do think that taking your own qualia and perception seriously is very important if you want to have a complete picture of reality. If you dismiss all experience and say it's just subjective, I think you're missing the most important component of what we call reality in the first place. From this state, there's no existential need to be fulfilled, no enlightenment to be reached, and no purpose or point of life to be found. Everything just works in perfect harmony with each other. This is where a lot of ideas of enlightenment come into play that sound often too good to be true. The inability to feel alone, to be always content and satisfied, to not suffer anymore. As magical as it sounds, it makes sense if you can imagine yourself to be a perfectly harmonized architecture. It has less resistance to the flow of life, because the ego stops blocking the harmonization process. In that sense, if you get hurt physically, you still feel the physical pain of the body, but the mind doesn't multiply the pain in some sort of suffering narrative. You kind of are over it the moment the experience is over, and it doesn't linger anymore. Like you ruminate about the past, about something that somebody told you 2 years ago. Instead, it is not something that matters or like lingers in you. Even though in the moment it might be awkward, once this is deeply integrated, you can find an immense beauty of reality all of a sudden. Like every single frame of existence has this immaculate intelligence to it, because it's a self-organizing principle. Like automatically, the universe or experience is morphing and shifting towards greater harmony once you let it. There's a self-exploration process that is happening at all times, where it really seems like reality is exploring itself without any limitation or resistance to what is possible. And you can call it experience of oneness, you can call it beingness, or just consciousness, or the universe, or the self, or if you're so inclined, it might be what God is. Heaven would be the place where even the worst of the worst is integrated into the harmonic self. Absolute unconditional love is a state of absolute harmony with the entirety of the cosmic system. That would mean that all consciousness and all experiences are seen as one. And from this point of view, it would have to be the most beautiful, absolutely blissful state imaginable. As a sacrifice, all the suffering and pain that happens on the lower level of geometrical or consciousness harmonics would be, part that are making the infinite bliss of self-exploration possible. Heaven then would be the ultimate bliss, because it's not just an extremely harmonic state, but it might be all dissonant states of all forms of existence and all positive states becoming one and integrated as one, as if all possible suffering is ultimately needed and accepted for the highest harmony possible. Endless experiences of endless states of harmonies. And honestly, on psychedelics, this is what it often feels like. It even feels obvious sometimes that reality works like this. That in some way, everything is like an entire cosmos, and every cosmos is its own love simulation, trying to understand how to harmonize with itself. Of course, as a human individual, it is very difficult to abstract so much into some metaphysical realm when you are grounded in your humanity. And this is why I think that the real integration happens in the human part, right? To see your own experience for what it is and care about it with love and compassion by doing what would create more harmonies within you. Because if harmonies is what matters, like valence, the quality of positive sensation is what matters, then being compassionate with yourself and others naturally leads you to, be kind and compassionate and make the world a better place. And it often starts with you. Reality then is forever rediscovering its own beauty with nothing to stop it. Like the goal is self-understanding of its own patterns. And it always has been. The ego is the most important component to understand to find this endless beauty within oneself. And we tend to not want to look at it. It's part of so much pain within this topological pocket. But we think we are the entirety of it. We think we are merely the suffering part. So if you want a more human and socially grounded understanding of what the ego is, without all of this, very sciencey type language, and just ground it in everyday experience with other people, and you want to understand how this ego operates, then I made this video here for you. Click here.